Right now, in 2026, the United States Navy is executing one of the most high-stakes, terrifying security operations in human history. American Arleigh Burke-class destroyers and carrier strike groups are actively patrolling the waters of the Middle East, intercepting drones, and projecting absolute military power. But they are not doing this to conquer territory. They are doing this to protect a tiny, almost invisible geographic feature. On the world map, it appears as nothing more than a thin line between two pieces of land. There are no bright colors, no large labels, and absolutely nothing remarkable to the untrained eye from a distance. Yet, hidden within that tiny blue line lies one of the greatest geographical powers modern civilization depends on. This is the Strait of Hormuz. At its narrowest point, this waterway is only about 33 kilometers wide, yet every single day, nearly 1/5 of the entire world's oil supply must pass through this narrow stretch of water to reach global markets. From space at night, Hormuz looks like a moving river of light. Those brilliant lights belong to hundreds of massive oil tankers carrying the lifeblood of the global economy, a flow that has almost never stopped for decades. Welcome back to US Geography. Today we are merging the brutal geopolitical reality of the 2026 war with the undeniable laws of the map. We are going to explore why the world's most advanced military is currently fighting to protect a 33-kilometer bottleneck, why alternative routes are a geographical illusion, and why the physical map dictates that the fate of the global economy will always be held hostage by the Strait of Hormuz. To understand why the United States military is risking all-out war in 2026 to keep this waterway open, we first have to understand the massive scale of the Persian Gulf. The Persian Gulf is an inland sea located directly between the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula and the towering rocky Iranian plateau. It is a massive body of water that stretches nearly 1,000 kilometers from northwest to southeast. But geography is a cruel architect. At its southeastern end, this massive gulf suddenly and violently narrows into a natural bottleneck. That highly restrictive bottleneck is the Strait of Hormuz. The geography of the coastlines here perfectly sets the stage for a geopolitical nightmare. The northern side of the strait is entirely controlled by Iran, featuring steep mountainous coastlines descending directly toward the sea. On to the south lie the nations of Oman and the United Arab Emirates, where the rugged Musandam Peninsula juts outward like a sharp blade into the water. This unusual, highly specific geography forms a natural funnel, making Hormuz one of the most strategic, heavily contested choke points on Earth. 8 different countries surround the Persian Gulf, and all of them have coastlines connected to the waters leading toward Hormuz. Many of these national economies depend heavily, if not entirely, on exporting energy to the rest of the world. And every single one of those nations understands a dark geographic truth. Whoever controls the exit of the Gulf holds enormous, undeniable influence over the region's entire economic future. While military analysts focus on the weapons of 2026, the real danger of Hormuz lies beneath the waves. The strait is about 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, but not all of that space can be used for navigation. In reality, the massive supertankers that power our world must travel through 2 incredibly narrow shipping lanes, each only about 3 kilometers wide. Why so narrow? Because the seabed beneath Hormuz is not completely flat. Deep underwater channels and highly dangerous shallow ridges force large, heavy tankers to follow carefully defined, highly restricted routes. These ancient natural formations effectively create mandatory shipping corridors that cannot be ignored. Furthermore, navigating these 3-kilometer lanes requires battling a highly unique hydrological pattern. Denser, salty water from the Gulf of Oman flows inward along the bottom of the strait, while warmer water from the Persian Gulf flows outward along the surface. These opposing invisible currents heavily influence navigation and require the shipping lanes to be carefully planned and rigidly enforced. To manage this massive, high-stakes traffic flow, a highly advanced maritime traffic control center in Oman continuously monitors ships passing through the strait. Radar screens track dozens of vessels at the same time, operating much like an air traffic control tower, but for ships weighing hundreds of thousands of tons. The United States Navy isn't just protecting a 33-kilometer strait, they are desperately guarding 2 fragile 3-kilometer invisible tightropes in the ocean. What exactly is traveling along these tightropes? The ships passing through Hormuz are among the largest, most spectacular machines ever built by humans. A very large crude carrier, or VLCC, can be more than 330 meters long and carry over 2 million barrels of oil in a single massive voyage. To put that into perspective, the cargo of just one such vessel can fuel millions of vehicles across the globe. Some oil tankers are even larger, known as ultra-large crude carriers, ULCCs. These ships can exceed 450 meters in length, making them longer than many of the world's most famous skyscrapers. Every single day, around 100 ships pass through Hormuz in both directions. This makes the strait one of the busiest, most congested maritime routes on the planet. Every morning, these giant tankers quietly cross the water east, and around 20 million barrels of oil pass through Hormuz every single day. That enormous volume makes this small, highly vulnerable strait one of the most economically valuable geographic points on the planet. Saudi Arabia contributes the absolute largest share to this daily energy flow. It is followed closely by Iraq, the UAE, Kuwait, and Iran, each exporting millions of barrels per day. Nowhere else in the world concentrates oil exports at this staggering scale. But the 2026 conflict isn't just about crude oil, it is about the gas that heats the homes of the Western world. Qatar is a geographically small peninsula, but it holds one of the largest natural gas reserves in the world. Beneath the waters directly between Qatar and Iran lies one of the largest natural gas fields on Earth. Qatar calls its section the North Field, while Iran refers to its side as South Pars. In reality, it is one enormous shared geological structure stretching silently beneath the seabed. To capitalize on this geography, Qatar built Ras Laffan, the absolute largest liquefied natural gas (LNG) export hub in the world. This sprawling industrial city was built almost entirely to liquefy natural gas and ship it to global markets. Much of that gas is transported by specialized LNG carriers, recognizable by their large, odd, distinct spherical tanks, which transport natural gas at extremely low temperatures. But here's the geographic trap: every single vessel leaving Ras Laffan must pass through the exact same route, the Strait of Hormuz. Roughly 1/5 of the entire world's LNG trade passes through Hormuz. When oil and natural gas are combined, the total value of energy passing through this waterway each day reaches into the billions of dollars. This staggering concentration of wealth is exactly why the United States is deeply involved in the Middle East today. The 2026 conflict is fundamentally about global economic survival. Most of the oil passing through Hormuz flows eastward toward Asia's major energy-hungry economies. China, Japan, South Korea, and India are among the largest consumers. Several of these Asian economies rely almost exclusively on oil shipments from the Persian Gulf. Japan and South Korea, two of America's most vital strategic allies, import the vast majority of their oil through this specific route. This makes Hormuz a critical, undeniable factor in Asia's energy security. A liter of gasoline in Asia often begins its journey at an oil well in the Middle East, is loaded onto a massive tanker, and must pass through Hormuz before continuing towards refineries in distant countries. If Iran were to successfully close this strait using naval mines, fast attack boats, or anti-ship missiles launched from their mountainous coastline, the economies of America's greatest allies would freeze within weeks. For decades, global oil markets have reacted strongly to tensions around Hormuz, and even when oil flows are not physically disrupted, the mere possibility of disruption causes massive price fluctuations. The US Navy is in the Gulf to ensure those fluctuations don't trigger a global depression. But surely, with trillions of dollars at stake, the world has built a backup plan, right? For years, policymakers and engineers have discussed building massive new pipelines that bypass Hormuz entirely. But mountainous terrain, brutal deserts, and extremely high construction costs make such projects incredibly difficult to realize. Saudi Arabia did build a massive pipeline stretching more than 1,000 kilometers across the desert. The East-West pipeline allows oil to move from the Persian Gulf directly to the Red Sea without ever passing through Hormuz. The UAE also developed its own strategic pipeline linking Abu Dhabi to the port of Fujairah on the Gulf of Oman. Because Fujairah lies outside Hormuz, part of the country's oil can safely reach global markets. But here is the grim reality. Even when all alternative pipelines are combined, their total capacity reaches only a few million barrels per day. By comparison, the flow through Hormuz is roughly 20 million. If Hormuz were disrupted, tankers could theoretically reroute around the Cape of Good Hope at the southern tip of Africa. But this path is significantly longer, greatly increases travel time, and causes transportation costs to rise sharply. If each voyage takes several weeks longer, overall global shipping capacity drops dramatically, and building enough additional tankers to compensate would take years. No alternative route can fully replace Hormuz in terms of scale and economic efficiency. Geography itself created an energy choke point the world still absolutely depends on. The power of this tiny strait extends far beyond just moving fuel. It underpins the entire global financial system. Hormuz is inextricably linked to global finance. Oil is largely traded in US dollars, and the astronomical revenues generated from these sales are often reinvested right back into international financial markets. Many Gulf countries have utilized their oil revenues to build massive sovereign wealth funds. These funds invest heavily in tech companies, infrastructure, and real estate across the world. A highly significant share of global investment capital today ultimately traces back to the energy flowing through the 33 kilometers of Hormuz. And what about the future? As the world gradually shifts toward renewable energy, many assume the importance of the Middle East will fade. But the Gulf nations are aggressively preparing for a future beyond oil. They are heavily investing in green hydrogen and new energy industries, harnessing the abundant, relentless sunlight of the desert. And if hydrogen becomes the dominant fuel of the future, the massive specialized ships carrying it will likely still have to pass through Hormuz. Fuels may change, and shipping technology may evolve, but the map does not change. Geography is destiny. When you look at the 2026 conflict, it is easy to get lost in the politics, the rhetoric, and the advanced military hardware. But at its core, this is a war over the map. From space, Hormuz appears as nothing more than a tiny line on the surface of the Earth. But zoom closer, and you see the massive ships, the rigid 3-kilometer shipping lanes, and an energy flow that never truly stops. Hormuz will remain the natural gateway of the Persian Gulf for millions of years, and whatever energy resources are exported from this region will still pass through that narrow stretch of water. As the sun sets over Hormuz, massive ships glide quietly across the water, and nothing about the calm scene suggests this is one of the most intensely guarded, important places in the global economy. A strait only 33 kilometers wide, yet every day it connects billions of dollars of energy to the rest of the world. And until the continents themselves shift, the modern global economy will continue to depend on that narrow stretch of water. Thank you for watching US Geography. If you want to understand how the map dictates the future of global conflicts and the world economy, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below what region of the world we should break down next. I'll see you again next week.